Well, the downed Malaysia Airlines plane was a Boeing 777, and very tragically the same type of aircraft that the Malaysians lost over the Indian Ocean back in March. Well, it has been suggested that the aircraft may have been mistaken for Ukrainian military aircraft, such as the MH17 cargo plane or the smaller Antonov 26 cargo plane. And we know that a couple of those aircraft were shot down in recent weeks over this area. But the Malaysian Airlines flight was flying much higher, flying at 33,000 feet, which is well above the height that those two cargo planes were flying at. Now, it's well out of the range of the shoulder-launched missiles, which are a height of 10,000 feet. So attention is now turning to the Buk missile system. That system can reach up to 75,000 feet and locates its targets by using a radar coverage rather than actually honing in on any of the heat involved. So anyone who experts say that the system, anyone who would be operating it would be able to determine, or should at least be able to determine, the difference between a military aircraft and a civilian aircraft.
I think these are likely to be Russian separatists, fanatical, probably not very well trained. It's likely that this missile system will have been acquired either by capturing it from the Ukrainians, one report said that, or indeed by being given by the Russians, potentially quite recently, and I don't think that would give much time for the crew to have the training that they need.
Well, for the air crash investigators, it's now vital they secure access to the wreckage. The investigation into the bombing of Pan Am Flight 103 over Lockerbie back in 1988 shows just how much evidence can still be retrieved after a catastrophic event. Investigators assembled the remains of that plane in a huge aircraft hangar, and they were able to determine the exact point where the bomb exploded, and they also found fragments of the bomb. Well, in eastern Ukraine, the vital clues that may lead them to knowing what happened to that aircraft may still lie within the wreckage if investigators can get there before anything of interest is removed.
We know that the plane was travelling at an altitude of 10 kilometres, that's just over 6 miles, when it was downed. The Ukrainian Interior Ministry said a missile was fired by a Buk system. This is a tracked vehicle that can fire missiles up to 14,000 metres in the air with a range of 45 kilometres. Both Russian and Ukrainian forces have these systems.
The SA-11 is a tank with 4 very large surface-to-air missiles on the back. It's also got an integrated and quite powerful phased array radar as a part of the sort of whole setup. And yeah, there have been unconfirmed sightings of SA-11s around the Donetsk area in the last couple of days, so it's most likely to have been the system used to shoot this down.
The Buk SA-11 has a powerful radar which would have been scanning 360 degrees for targets.
Once they've decided on tracking and engaging a target, the pressure is then on to engage that target as fast as possible and then relocate.
Even with that pressure, it would be difficult to mistake a fighter jet for a passenger plane. But military transports, which have been targeted recently, can appear similar.
These are radar-guided missiles, so it will have essentially gone up close to the main body of the aircraft and then detonated on proximity fuse or warhead, which will have perforated the fuselage, the fuel tanks, engines, caused enough damage to take down the aircraft. And of course, civilian airliners are not armoured in any way, unlike military vehicles.
The pilots, crew and passengers would have had no warning. But NATO satellites and reconnaissance planes have been watching the conflict area and will now be combing it for a telltale missile flash and radar signal to piece together what happened. Tom Cheshire, Sky News.
Good afternoon, this is Scott Anthony for Thursday, July 17th, 2014. This is regarding Malaysia Airlines Flight 17, shot down today, apparently, somewhere over the Ukraine-Russian border. This happens 131 days after Malaysia Flight 370 disappeared March 8th, 2014. Statistically, I think we all know that this is an impossibility. Statistically, no major airline has suffered two major losses of two 777 Boeings in the same year, let alone 131 days. Looking at the flight track, you see MH17 departed 6:30 a.m. This is Eastern time, so I'm not sure the exact time over in Amsterdam. Took off 6:30 a.m. Everything appears normal. These are the lat longs and the course right here. Everything appears normal. There's no drastic deviations in course or altitude. Maintaining 8,000, climbing 11,000 at 6:38. Climbing, 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 climbing. Not sure what this reading is right here. No indication of climbing or descending, but I'm assuming that'll be a climb. Until we get to a cruising altitude. It probably wasn't at cruising altitude yet. It's still at 31,000 feet. At a speed of 509 knots. Bearing course 83 degrees. At 6:53 a.m. It's the last track we had of flight MH17. At 6:53 p.m. That's 23 minutes after departure. And then we lose it after it climbs 180 feet. And then it disappeared. Just for reference, these are images of the Boeing 777. Considered one of the most safest planes in the airline industry. And yet this flight, MH17, only made it 23 minutes into an 11-hour and 28-minute flight. According to CNN, of course you have to take this with a grain of salt, the aircraft was not downed in an airspace that was restricted, according to International Air Transport Association. Of course, we'll see what this, how this plays out, but supposedly was not in restricted airspace.
There has been a plane crash. A Malaysian jetliner went down today in Ukraine near the border with Russia. Malaysian Air Flight 17 was en route from Amsterdam to Kuala Lumpur with 295 people on board. We're just getting...
It took off from Amsterdam. We believe it to be Malaysian Airlines Flight 17 with, as you said, 280 passengers, a crew of 15. It was en route to Southeast Asia. When it got over Ukrainian airspace, that's when radar lost track of the airplane. On 3,000 feet, that's the safest phase of flight. That's called cruise altitude. At that point, the pilots are kind of going along, monitoring systems. It's not nearly as risky usually as a takeoff or a landing. Suddenly, when we look at radar tracking data, we see at about 33,000 feet, that's the last reported position that some of these tracking stations have. So what
is in conflict where there is a lot happening on the ground. What do we know about the information gathering at this point? I mean, who is sort of providing the best source of information here? The airline really not saying much at this time.
Well, the reports originated with Interfax news agency, and then on top of that, Ukrainian officials have come out to verify that, in fact, the plane is down. In fact, an advisor to the Ukrainian minister said that he confirmed 295 fatalities. Again, though, this information is moving faster than U.S. authorities are able to confirm it. Now, one had to have involved some kind of large surface-to-air missile or perhaps some kind of air-to-air missile. As you point out, Margaret, Ukraine is an area of unrest. We've got separatists there fighting the government. We know Russian forces have been massing again on the border. There's no indication at this point, though we want to emphasize this, we do not know exactly what happened here, and we do not know who is responsible for this, if in fact it was a shoot-down.
Of course, this is serious for both the United States and Russia, and President Obama and Putin did speak together. President Putin had stated to President Obama that essentially the plane crashed and there were no survivors of the 295 people on board. This number may fluctuate, but that's the number I've been seeing. And again, Russia is denying that they've had any doing in the downing of this plane, that it simply crashed. So a Boeing 777, like MH17, would be the second Boeing 77 in a fleet owned by Malaysian Airlines to crash in 131 days. What do you think about that?